They had no idea who I was moment. I got laid off after 10 years in IT when my company decided to cut costs. My manager, Brad, basically threw me under the bus, telling upper management that my projects were behind schedule. The funny thing, Brad had been taking credit for my work the entire time I was there. For 6 months, I couldn't find anything decent. My savings were running out and I was getting desperate. Then this staffing agency called about a temporary data contractor position. The pay was half what I used to make, but I needed something. When they told me the company name, I almost hung up. It was my old job, but then I thought about it. I'd grown out my beard, lost some weight, and started wearing contacts instead of glasses. Plus, I'd always worked behind the scenes. Most people there had never really looked at me twice. I took the job. Walking into that building again felt surreal. The security guard who used to nod at me every morning didn't recognize me. Neither did Karen from HR, who processed my termination paperwork 6 months earlier. But the best part? They assigned me to work directly under Brad. He introduced himself like we'd never met, shaking my hand and explaining how the department worked. I just nodded and said I was excited to learn. Inside, I was dying laughing. The first week, Brad gave me tasks that used to be mine, fixing the backup system that had been broken for months, updating the database that he'd always promised to handle but never did. He acted completely clueless about everything, asking me basic questions about systems I'd built from scratch. I played dumb and fixed everything quietly, but I also started documenting things. Every shortcut Brad had taken, every time he'd blamed others for his mistakes, every project he'd stolen credit for. I left anonymous reports in the shared folders, detailed explanations of problems that had been ignored for years, screenshots of Brad's emails where he'd thrown people under the bus. By week 3, the whole department was running smoother than it had in years. Systems were actually working. Projects were getting done ahead of schedule. Upper management started asking questions about how the new temp guy was fixing things their full-time team couldn't handle. That's when they called me upstairs. The VP of IT sat across from me, impressed. "We'd like to offer you a permanent position. Your work has been incredible. Can you tell us about your background?" I smiled and pulled out my old employee badge. "Actually, I used to work here. You laid me off 6 months ago." The room went dead silent. "My name's Dave Collins. I worked in this department for 10 years. I built most of the systems your current team has been struggling with." The VP's face went white. He started flipping through papers, probably looking for my old file. "Brad told you my projects were behind schedule when you fired me, but those were his projects. He'd been taking credit for my work since day one. Everything I fixed these past 3 weeks, those were problems he created or ignored." I handed over copies of all the documentation I'd been collecting. Years of Brad's incompetence, all laid out in detail. They offered me Brad's job that same day, with a 30% raise. When I walked back to the department, Brad was waiting by my desk. He still didn't know who I was, but he'd heard about the meeting upstairs. "Hey, I heard they might promote you over me," he said, trying to sound casual. "That's crazy, right? I mean, you've only been here 3 weeks. I packed up my temp badge and looked him straight in the eye. "Yeah, Brad, 3 weeks is all it took to prove you've been useless for 10 years. The recognition hit his face like a truck. His mouth fell open. "Dave, but you look so different." "Yeah, unemployment will do that to you." Security escorted him out an hour later. I heard he's working at a gas station now.